Përshëndetje, and welcome back to another episode of the EaglePod. I'm your host, Lorena, and I'm so happy that you're here. My guest today is Enri Lala, and I'm so excited to have him on the pod. So thank you for being here, Enri. How are you doing?
I'm very well, Joanna. Really nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So can you first kind of speak on your Albanian background? Were you born in Albania? And if so, how was the
hmm
adjustment of like coming here?
Yeah, gladly. I was born in Tirana, our capital. Both of my parents are from the region of Saranda in the south. It's sort of the quintessential Albanian story. My mom's side is Orthodox Christian. My dad's side is Muslim Albanian. They come from an Orthodox and a Muslim village each. They met in high school, sort of high school sweethearts, and then moved to Tirana after the downfall of communism. That's where I grew up. I went to school and everything for the first 11 years of my life, going to Saranda every summer. That's always been the ultimate home, so to speak, at least in the emotional sense, because that's where you would go and grandparents would be there. And most importantly, the sea.
Mhm.
But yeah, I moved here at 11, first to Florida, although I stayed there for like a minute total. I mean, it was about 3 months. As soon as I finished that, I think it was the last 3 months of sixth grade. And then as soon as that was over, we moved to Southern California, where I was raised for the last 7 years. Sort of the Palm Springs area. The Coachella Festival is going on right now. So you might be familiar with that. It's right around that area. And I go to UC Santa Barbara now.
Mhm.
I'm studying history and global studies, which is essentially international relations, but more with a focus on globalization and the future. And obviously, a lot of that focuses around Albanian history and developments in the Balkans and whatnot.
Yeah.
And did you ask about the adjustment here?
Yeah, just like the adjustment here for you.
Yeah.
Did you have like a strong Albanian community to help you through? Was it just
Mm,
your family?
yeah. Oh man, that's a very important question. I neither in Florida nor in Southern California is there really a big Albanian community, so to speak. But there are key figures who are willing to help you beyond anything else. And I was actually thinking about this the past week. I think one of the major cultural differences is my dad has a saying. He's like, I would jump into a fire for you, or I would jump into a fire for a friend. And I don't think that's an exaggeration. I think it's a genuine part of the culture that you would do anything for a friend. And then here there's genuine friendships that people sacrifice all the time without a doubt, but there seems to be reasonable extents to it. And
Yeah.
there's an important difference there. But for example, the my dad's childhood best friend who hosted us in Florida originally, he was actually of the ethnic Greek minority in southern Albania, but they were like huge friends growing up. So he was like, of course, I'll host you when you come here. And I think this is a really good example of how sort of we support one another when we first come here. His brother lives here in Santa Barbara, some minutes away, and I needed some help. You might have seen on social media,
Yeah.
I'm running for something, student government
Yes.
here at my school. Yeah, for senator to be precise.
Mhm.
And I needed to move this huge board. It's still outside. And my friends here were like, dude, we don't know how to help you. I mean, this thing is huge. We don't know how to construct
Yeah.
it. And I asked my dad, who then asked this brother of the man who hosted us, and he's going to help me sort of construct it and put it over there. I mean,
That's
we
awesome.
just go
Yeah.
above and beyond for one another,
We
even
do.
on the other side of the world. So even when it's a really small community,
Mm.
we get things done.
Yeah. No, I love to hear that. And so amazing to hear. And I'm happy
Yeah.
it seems like you had a smooth tra adjustment here. And so, like you mentioned, you're a sophomore at the University
hmm
of California, Santa Barbara,
Right.
majoring in history, and you're involved with so many orgs at your school. I checked your LinkedIn. And you recently mentioned you've announced your candidacy for the off-campus senator in the upcoming
Yeah.
general elections at your school. So first of all, can you kind of talk about like what the college experience has been for you here, as well as kind of what motivated you to run for senator?
Yeah. UC Santa Barbara is known as sort of the number one party school. That's its
Oh,
quintessential image. We're right by the beach.
I wasn't aware of that
People
actually.
know how to part. Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can look up. We're number one on that list every time, of college or party schools.
Mm.
There's obviously some truth to that image. It's a delightful place to be around. It's in the sun, everyone's biking around, everyone seems happy and whatnot. But there's also a really, it's a rigorous place. You know, people are doing high level research, people are really involved in their academics. I've quite enjoyed it. I thought in high school that I wanted to go to the East Coast, sort of the more solemn, somber schools, but I'm sort of glad I did undergraduate in California, and I have this mix of the sun and the books, so to speak. I quite enjoyed it. But to answer your part about why did I run for Senate, there's even in this sort of sunny paradise that you see, there's some significant issues. I'm actually not aware if this is a big problem or talked about much in other parts of the country, but the housing crisis here is enormous all throughout California, and it affects students quite a lot. You know, we don't have the most resources out of any demographic in societies. You can't really take your landlords to court and whatnot. But for example, in my school, only 40% of second years, people in my year who apply for housing by the school get it. So if you're in the majority, if you're in that 60%, you have to sort of go and figure it out on your own, you know? So there's really
Wow, that's crazy.
practical issues that I would actually want to contribute to. You know, you can't transform them into utopia overnight, but you can do something.
Little changes here and there.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. Yeah, well, good luck. You seem very
Thank
positive
you.
about it, and I hope you win. I also want to say congrats for reaching the finals of the 2024 National Ethics Bowl Champion. Can you
Yeah.
kind of talk about how that experience was for you, how you prepped for it, and maybe like any advice to like people who are interested in competing?
Gladly.
Yeah.
I joined, so Ethics Bowl, to start off with, funny name, but sort of explanatory. It's a competitive philosophy debate team. And I joined almost first day my freshman year. I was really passionate to do something like that. And we first competed so we have regional tournaments. So ours is in California, and then you go to the national tournament. And our team has generally been pretty good long before I came here. And that year we didn't make it to the nationals. It was sort of like I don't want to say a traumatic experience, but a bit of a shock. You know, it took us aback. We sort of lost the first round and stumbled through the other ones. And then we've gradually come back. We got third place at what's called Bioethics Bowl last year, which is the same kind of format, but focused on biomedical issues. That was in Boston. I love Boston. And then this year at regionals, we made it to the finals. We lost narrowly to Stanford, but you got used to the rhythm of the competition, and it's a lot of preparation. It's about 17 cases per packet that they have you prepare for, and it can range on anything from the ones I really focus on have to do either with foreign policy, war, or like artificial intelligence. I did a lot of those, you know, on the war in Ukraine, AI, things like that. But they also include obviously biomedical issues, things like abortion, healthcare rights. It can be virtually anything.
Yeah.
So we made it to nationals this time around, and the national competition was in Cincinnati, in Aaron's home state, great state of Ohio. And it was at this sort of grandiose Hilton Hotel at the center of Cincinnati. Sort of Winston Churchill had stayed there. They really hyped the hotel up for us. And we're getting prepared the night before, and our captain tells us the schedule, like the teams we're about to face.
Yeah.
And we see, and it's Yale, it's the U.S. Naval Academy, who were the champions last year. It's UChicago, and this team from Maryland who placed second at last year's bioethics. And you could have heard the silence in the room. It was like, my God, what did we do all this preparation for? It seemed like it was all going to go down the drain.
Yeah.
But then we sort of got it together. We practiced really intensely. We stayed disciplined for that. Well, the day we had left before competition. And the first day of competition was Yale and the Naval Academy. It was sort of the most difficult part out first.
Yeah.
And we won both. And the second day we started off with the Maryland College. We won that one. The last one was against Chicago. That was a draw somehow, but nonetheless, we got through.
Amazing.
And it's sort of it's the entire time it's this mix of, okay, I knew this could happen, because it's obviously a mix of like willpower and coaches who really helped us for the first time in the club's history. But there's also this sense of, how is this happening? You know?
Yeah.
And we make it through the quarterfinals. and the semis against this team from Washington was really good. And there was this coach from another California team who spoke to me after the competition, and he was like, looking at you guys after the semifinal sort of reminded me of why I'm involved in this competition, because you were always saying things like, wow, this is surreal. Like, how is this happening? And then we make it to the finals, and we're facing a team from your great home state of North Carolina, UNC Chapel Hill. And it's sort of on this grand stage in the middle of some conference room, and there's like 100 people there. It's all being filmed. And I'm sure there's pressure, but you're just enjoying the moment at that point. It's so, I felt like I was flying at that point. It just wasn't real. We narrowly lost by, I think it was 6 points total out of a total of 60 something.
Oh,
And obviously that's a devastating moment. You know, you
yeah.
can't sugarcoat that. And I'm the kind of person who will sort of beat myself up over things like that. But after a few days, it sort of settles in, and you're like, this. I mean, I used to watch videos of the finals of the national competition and take inspiration from these people.
Yeah.
And the thought that some kid who's involved in this competition next year, the years after that, will look at our videos is like, that's a blessing. No,
Yeah. No, it's inspirational. You made it to the final. That's pretty good. Next year, you probably might win the whole thing.
you smell.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because so how long did you guys have to prep for it all?
Mm. The cases were released in late December,
Okay.
and we had to compete in late February,
All right.
which sounds like a decent amount of time, but then you structure a case and then you're running by the coaches and they're like, actually, this makes no sense. And you have 2 weeks left till competition, and it comes together pretty quickly. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Is the 2024 National Ethics Bowl is that recorded? Where can our viewers find out more about the competition?
Yeah, it actually was. It should it should show up under 2024 AAPE
Mhm.
IEB National Final, but I will also,
Okay.
I could link it, send it
Yeah.
over to you so you could link it there.
Yeah.
But I
Perfect.
would I would give a fair warning that luxurious as the hotel was, the mic system was atrocious. You can
Oh.
hardly hear certain things.
Okay.
You can still get the gist of the of what we're saying, but it's pretty funny at certain points. It's like, hi, I'm Enri Lala, and then
Oh,
the
okay.
sentence goes on. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, all right. Perfect. I'll link it down below for anyone who's interested. Um, also seen that you have at the office of Congressman Dr. Raul Ruiz, and you've also interned
Ruiz.
at
Yeah.
the House of Representatives in the last 2 years. So how are those two experiences? What do you think helped you stand out from other candidates as well? And yeah.
That's a good question. Dr. Ruiz is my sort of my hometown representative of the Coachella Valley that I've spent the last 7 years in. And I've always been interested in politics, history, international relations, all the whole shebang. And I remember it was at the end of our senior year in high school. They sort of had this posting on, how we had Google Classrooms back in the day. I assume you had the same thing.
Yeah.
Um, it was sort of the one for all seniors, and they advertised this opportunity to intern for his campaign. And I was like, okay, let's do it. And I dedicated my entire summer after my senior year to that. I was sort of campaigning for Dr. Ruiz was my one identity, so to speak.
You're
I
like, we're
led
doing this.
we're doing this, his reelection campaign by that point. And I led, voter registration drives, did some phone banking, had to practice my Spanish doing that. It's a largely Spanish speaking district, and just really enjoyed it. And my first year here, I connected with the intern coordinator there, and I expressed my interest that I would really like to go to Washington, and was very glad to do so. The next summer, I interned again in his office in Washington. And the really cool part was that I was not only helping in this national federal context, but I was working on issues that affected my own community, things that I knew quite well because I actually lived in the region.
Yeah.
So it was just a really special experience, just being in, I think for any kid, I was 18 at the time, right? Yeah. Just being in Washington, you're working in
Yeah.
Congress, you're just like, there's some of the most
Everything's
powerful
so
people.
official.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There, you just you're in the elevator with Jim Jordan, and you get off and Steve Scalise is walking around, you know. But I think especially coming from Albania made it even more special because one, we have such an we admire the United States for good reason, you know. The United States was there, and to get back to my history side at crucial points in Albanian history, there's a very good argument that Albanian independence wouldn't exist without the United States in the early 20th century, and Kosovo's independence absolutely would not have existed without the United States.
Yeah.
So, and that sense of distance and gives you even more gratitude to be at the center of it all. So I really enjoyed that experience.
Yeah. So today's fun fact of the day is brought to you by Enri Lala.
I would say my fun fact, I've contributed some thoughts to this, and they're always on something really specific.
Yeah.
But sometimes I think my ultimate fun fact about our history would be just its magnitude. The fact that you're obviously not, you know, the Illyrians aren't a 1-to-1 ratio with the Albanians. That would be sort of absurd to say. But the fact that in one way or another, we've existed in that region of Europe for 3,000 years, have maintained the same language essentially throughout countless invasions, threats from outside, internal conflicts, poverty, etc.
We're a strong group of people.
That's pretty fun. That's pretty fun. It's extremely important to maintain one's awareness of that and appreciate it. So, what about you, Lorena? What's your
my fun fact?
Favorite part of fun fact, and then favorite part of history?
Oh God. All right. I feel like there's a lot in our history though. I always loved, just growing up, because my mom was born in Shkodër, so she lived like really close to the castle Kalaya Rezafes. And so I loved, like, I thought that like legend, that story was just so cool. Like I remember as a little kid, I'd be like looking things up because she would tell me, I remember it all the way, but this couple was married, and then he had like two brothers, and they were like the castle kept falling down, and so they needed something
Correct.
like to hold it. And so I think they like made her part of the wall or something like that. His wife. If you wanna talk about Enri, I feel like you could do a better job.
I can tell you because you awoke a childhood memory in me.
Okay.
What would it be? My 5th grade year. So the last full year before I came to the US, I was a part of this play at my school then about Kalaya Rozafas, about the myth of Rozafa.
Yeah.
And I played the youngest brother.
Okay.
And the story is essentially it's 3 brothers who are building the castle, and they're all married to three women. And the problem is that they keep building it by day, and it keeps getting destroyed by night. And this is like a really important I don't want to say anecdote, but it's very memorable in Albanian lore, so to speak. There's a Kadare poem who references this. I think he says something like, the state is not like the castle of Rozafa, which can be built by day and destroyed by night. Like it's a well-known phrase, so to speak. And I think this part I'm not sure about, but I think it's a wise man comes up to them and goes, all right, this thing keeps falling at night. What you've got to do is go to your wives, each of you separately. When you go to your separate homes, you tell your wife, or maybe not separately because the story wouldn't make sense. But anyways, you go to your wives and tell them that one has to go and bring lunch tomorrow.
Oh yes. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, but you cannot tell her that this is what's going to happen, that she's going to be made part of the wall or whatever. The 2 older brothers go home and tell their wives. they break the covenant.
Yeah.
My character the noble youngest brother doesn't say anything. So they go back to work tomorrow. They're all, toiling away. They're all nervous, but the youngest brother, especially so, because he knows he hasn't said anything. And I remember that scene in the play where the girl that was playing the character of my wife came in, and I sort of had to make this dramatic, like the tool that I was working with, I sort of drop it, and I have to look up shocked, and all the parents are in the audience. The experience was so integral to me that I genuinely wanted to be an actor for a few years after that. That's how much I
Okay.
enjoyed being part of that play.
Yeah.
Um,
Are you
but
still part
yeah,
of plays now?
um, not so much anymore. I
Okay.
did so in high school, not the musical or dance strand. I have no real talent for that. Just I enjoy the art of acting generally, but we used to go on field trips a few times actually. One of
Yeah.
my favorites, one of my favorite places. But you said your parents, or was it your grandparents that moved here, and when?
Well, so my dad was he kind of during communist times, he
Oh,
kind of just escaped that I don't know what sea he had to swim in order to escape, but he secretly
yeah,
escaped. And then his I think at that time too, his parents, my grandparents, they had to go, they had internment camps, didn't they? If they
of course,
found out that someone in your family like
of
left or
course.
escaped, they would put them
Yep.
in. And so, but I think about that time though, communism was like over.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
so my dad lived here for a couple of years. He went back to Albania. He brought my mom over.
Oh,
And they basically brought my whole family over. Like he brought
wow.
my mom's sisters, his brothers, my grandparents. And so they
Wow.
all live here thanks to my dad.
The quintessential story of bringing the whole clan over. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm assuming it's end of the 80s then, when communism was weakened,
Yeah.
that he escaped. Yeah,
Yes, I think so. I have to ask him,
there's
honestly.
yeah, there's stories about this in Saranda too. There's always it's a historical debate I have with my parents, with older generations and the family generally.
Mhm.
The successor to Enver Hoxha was Ramiz Alia, and
Mhm.
there's sort of a debate about what his legacy is, and they tend to argue, or at least the narrative that's inherited, is that he should be given some credit because he sort of liberalized the transition. He didn't really kill anyone, for example, when the protesters came. Well, four were killed in Shkodra, actually, but um, from my own study of that period, that narrative is completely false. There's stories in Saranda that my parents would remember. So this means they must have been, my parents were born in 76 and 78, respectively. So it must mean it was at least 86 and beyond and afterwards of, just gonna get a bit morbid, I'm sorry, but
No.
like you would escape from Saranda, you would try to find the closest spot to the island opposite is Corfuz, the Greek
Okay.
island.
Yeah.
And the ones who wanted to escape would find the nearest point, and that's usually Lukova, this beach, beautiful beach, I think slightly north. And they would lather themselves up with Vaseline. I never understood why, but I think that it protects you from the cold of the water, something of that nature. And they would just go at it. But there was a point past which they had my God, I forget what it's called in English, but tapa, we say in Albanian, like they
Oh,
sort of demarcate.
yeah, that's what my dad talked about too. I don't know
Yeah.
how to say those in English.
Um, let's say a line, okay?
Okay.
A line of these objects in the sea
Yeah.
past which you can't cross.
Yeah.
Um, and if you were to cross that line, the standard protocol was to shoot the person who was trying
Yeah.
to escape in the water, bring them onto the boat,
Hmm.
and then this was arguably the most horrific part, is they would parade them around the city. The message to that being very clear that if you try to do this, this fate shall befall you as well.
Yeah.
So I sort of reminded them of this, and I was like, "What do you mean liberalizing? What are you talking about? Did you not remember this?" And they're like, "Oh, I guess you're right." And I think slightly related, but I think it not being a more violent blowback when the student movement eventually happens in December 1990 and people are completely fed up with the system is because of the Ceausescu example in Romania. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but
I'm
the
not.
Romanians rise up in 1989. Um, really dramatic scenes. It's like he's giving a speech in front of the parliament and they start booing him, which is completely unheard of for a communist dictatorship.
Yeah.
He tries to take a helicopter, they intercept him, and then I believe Christmas Eve of '89, they execute both the dictator and his wife. So other dictators in Eastern Europe and ours especially must have been like, oh, let's not do that. So I think there not have been more bloodshed can be more directly attributed to that historical example than the goodness of their hearts and whatnot.
Yeah.
But sorry, yet another historical tangent out
No,
of
that
your
was
dad's
really
personal
cool.
story.
No, we all love listening to Enri talk about history. Kind of want to shift our focus to the Arbanon Magazine now. I've enjoyed reading all the articles that you've published there already.
Lovely.
Very informative. It covers various topics concerning Albanian history. Kind of just like what was the inspiration behind Arbanon? What do you hope to bring forth in the future? And yeah.
Yeah. I actually remember the exact night when this idea, struck me like a thunderbolt. I had been for about a year before coming into college. I had this doc of articles that I wanted to write on Albanian history, on current events, but
Yeah.
it was just a doc. No one was reading it besides myself. And we were at orientation for UC Santa Barbara. I was with my parents. We were at some awful motel out in Santa Barbara, and I couldn't sleep. I don't know about you, but before big days, big events, I can never sleep. I always come in with a
Same.
maximum of 3 hours. So I was just thinking, I don't know, just planning ahead for the future. Maybe it all came together,
Yeah.
and it hit me all at once. I was like, it has to be a website. It has to be focused on both history and current events, and it has to be named Arbon, which
So that
derives
all
from
came to you in that instance?
in the same night. In the same night. Yeah, it comes from obviously the ancient term for the land is Illyria, but then the sort of more medieval term would be Arboria in Albanian and
Yeah.
Arbanon. So the first state entity in, let's say, our history so long that you can say recent in the year post 1000, like 11th century, the first state entity was the Principality of Arbanon, helped by sort of French invaders, but nonetheless, that was the first entity on the map that had a name that represented the Albanian people. So that was its that's the meaning behind the name as well. It's sort of representing that continuity and historical background and whatnot. And as you've seen from the articles, they cover things as this and as, for example, the formation of the Albanian national identity in comparison with the Iranian one. Dina, for example, who's also in SAPS with us, is going to contribute eventually something about Butrint, an archaeological site in by Saranda, by where I'm from. And I'm going to add more and more interviews with really significant figures. The first was Faton Limani,
Yeah.
the man who brought Albania to Harvard, who gave a lecture to us students. I mean, he's just incredible in every way. But
It's amazing.
I really want to focus it more on that end of current events and speaking to figures who are doing really important things. And I want to branch it into a legitimate media site where, and that's the, I think the subtitle is bringing Albania to the world and the world to Albania. It's really important to tell your own stories and
Yeah.
not have things like the movie Taken dominate your perception to the world, for example. So
Yeah, I agree. And I wish you all success with that.
appreciate it.
I will link that website down
Amazing.
below. Do you have an Instagram page for it or no?
Um, it would just be my own Instagram
Your
page
own
at this point. I
Instagram?
have it linked
Yeah.
on there, but
I'll
no,
put your
I absolutely,
Instagram down below as
that'd
well.
be great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I should do a Facebook as well because that's where all the Albanian mothers and grandmothers are. So
Yeah. True. What is your kind of you're just you know so much about history. You're so knowledgeable about that stuff, especially Albanian history. Just
uh,
wanted to ask you like what your favorite topic to write about would have to be.
oof. the entire period
Hmm.
of, as I said, the national identity formation, but it's most often viewed as the Rilindia period.
Hmm.
So sort of the national renaissance. You think figures like Naim Frasheri, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
But going on into the 20th century, um, figures that even once the state was established, I mean, Albania could have gone in very different directions.
I agree.
There was a push by, for example, figures like Esad Pasha, who wanted to sort of, have the north be annexed by the then Kingdom of Serbia and Slovenes and Croats, and south by Greece, and sort of just have his own central Albanian republic. We shouldn't take it for granted. Essentially, I've always been fascinated with that entire period, going into the 1920s, maybe until King Zog gets into power, and the state is sort of it's a fact by that point. But I would say one figure I've been really interested in that fits with this period really well is Fai Konica, if you're familiar, from the Konica region of the
Yeah.
southeast. And I think him, along with Fanoli, are especially important for us Albanian Americans. They're, I think, the two most iconic figures of the diaspora here. And he just had this. Noli was a genius in his own right, but he was more, more put together. You can say he was prime minister in 24, and then he was an Orthodox bishop and whatnot. But Konica had this biting wit. I mean, and the unfortunate part about his legacy is that if you want to read the most exemplary criticisms of modern Albanian society, don't read the modern newspapers or intellectuals, whatever. You read Konica,
Okay.
and that's impressive of his intellectual ability, but it's also a negative commentary in some way of the stagnation of our own society, that a commentary that was written 100 years ago would still apply today. I'm thinking of the Four Tales of Zululand, for example, or Dr. Gilpura, who's Dr. Gilpura, Englishized, who's this doctor who studies in Sweden and then comes back to Tirana, and he sort of has his vision of how to fix it and whatnot, and no one's listening to him. It's the quintessential story of you want to save the fatherland, but
Yeah.
no one seems willing to save it with you. He's incredible, and he has this one quote. Uh, it's a bit profane, but you'll
Go
have
ahead.
the you'll have the liberty of editing it out or not. I'll say it
Okay.
in Albanian and then try to translate it because it's kind of difficult. But it's a Shqipëri të kam dhier, s'të kuptova asnjëherë.
Okay.
Which, if I were to try to translate it, is something like Albania, damn you,
Yeah.
although the connotation is a bit stronger than
Yes.
that. I never did understand you, something like that.
Mhm.
And I think it's almost a statement of humility that if Fai Konica, who spent decades studying and leading that nation, didn't fully understand it, it sort of gave me an intellectual humility when I first read it. Like, oh, there's more here. If you didn't understand it,
Yeah.
I've got to read and think a lot more.
Yeah.
So
Oh, that's a good one. It's very funny. Yeah. It's really informative and yeah. No, I always try to, just growing up, like you hear all these stories from our parents and my grandparents have so many more stories to tell.
yeah,
Um, and so I always try to do like my research, try to read more up on it, even though it's not really my field.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, more on the medicine science based stuff, but it's just
yeah,
good to know about your roots and where you came from and your
yeah,
history background. So I appreciate
yeah,
you sharing that with us today. Um,
yeah. I would know next to none about medicine. So
exactly.
both, yeah. But for readings, I mean, I have many things I could recommend, but
Yeah.
genuinely, I went back for the first time in 7 years last summer. And
Okay.
I really mean this. The most fascinating thing is just ask your grandma or your grandpa an open-ended question and just shut up and listen. It'll
Yeah.
be the most informative, the most beautiful experience you could give yourself. I always say old people are like libraries. When one perishes, it's like a library is burned down. There's so much experience and life in that one person, especially when they're that close to you and they share your family and cultural heritage and whatnot. It's really invaluable to just listen to them.
For sure. Yeah, they've been through a lot. So moving on, I wanted to ask you, who has been your motivation, your
Mm.
inspiration, um, throughout your life?
Important questions you can ask. I mean, there's obviously figures from history which you can
Yeah,
gain inspiration from. Probably Jairus Castrioti being the first and foremost. Whenever you feel down, what bigger source of strength can you read about? But ultimately, even I'm not a history nerd enough to say my ultimate inspiration would be from a textbook. It would have to be my own parents. I get an aspect of my character from both. My mom is she's extremely intelligent, kind, humble, and my dad has this sort of unique strength of will and, most importantly, of sacrifice. I think for me, he exemplifies the Albanian virtues better than anyone I've known. He will sort of sacrifice, as I said previously, anything for friends, for family, and I mean, just that we sort of you almost take it for granted sometimes if you don't sit down and think about it. But for them to, and this is the case for thousands, maybe, of Albanian families, to leave your careers, your jobs, families, everything, to move to the other side of the world, even when you're okay back at home, just to give your kids an opportunity for a better
sacrifices.
education, a better life. I mean, what could be a better and more influential sacrifice than that to me? So they're my guiding light, first and foremost, for sure.
All right. That's beautiful. Yeah. My parents are for me too. And I know
I bet.
if you've seen our last episode, Ray was like, yeah, that's such a cliche answer, but I feel like it's so true.
It's cliche for a reason.
Yeah.
It resonates with many people.
Yeah, I agree. So last question before we move on to the rapid fire round. Just looking back, any advice you would give to your younger self?
I think it would be the same advice I would give to myself today,
Okay.
is try to be less hard on yourself.
Hmm.
There's a balance here, of course. You can't just let yourself off the rails completely. I'm not saying that at all. But I think we have a tendency. I mean, I don't want to offload my personal responsibility to the culture or whatever. I'm sure it's informed by the way I view things personally. But I think we have this tendency culturally to sort of, if you've made a mistake, you really spend a lot of attention on that one mistake. And I'm sort of trying to train myself to just move past it. It's a part of the record now, whatever. You go on with your life,
Yeah.
even I don't know, you didn't say hi properly to some friend passing the street, or you got a grade on the exam that was a 98 and not a 100. It's over. It's done. It doesn't, and more importantly, it doesn't reflect on your character. I think that's the crucial distinction, is that you're still the person you otherwise are, even if you have this
Yeah.
one blemish on your record, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I think this applies for a high schooler applying to colleges who didn't get in somewhere, if you didn't get the promotion at 30, just to separate your own personal character and your ability to accomplish things from this one event. I think that's crucial, and it's something I got to work on
Yeah.
continuously.
Oh, great piece of advice. I definitely agree with you. I think there's moments in life where, you want to do the right thing. You want to kind of sort of be perfect. That's like
Yeah,
our
yeah,
Albanianness. We just want to do all
exactly.
the time, be
Yeah,
first, be number one. And sometimes it's just like when those challenges occur, like how do you
yeah,
learn from your mistakes so you don't repeat? How do you get better? It's all about just continuous improvement. It's a
yeah.
lifetime thing. But yeah, thank you for that. So
Completely
now
agree.
on to the rapid fire round where I'm going to ask you five fun questions and just you quickly answer. All right.
I gotta respond rapidly. Okay.
Yes, yeah, basically. But if you want to stop and just like elaborate, that's fine too.
Think about. Okay.
Yeah. All right. Coolest history fact you know.
Oh, that's gonna take a minute. Oh, it's gonna take the wins out of the rapid fire round. I think one that's always impressed me was, I'm gonna bring it back to Albanian history, but whatever.
Okay.
Would
I mean, we have
be
the best history.
Muhammad Ali, but not the boxer,
Mhm.
the Albanian governor of Egypt under the Ottoman Empire, who sort of broke away from the Ottoman Empire. He had really distinct sovereignty under it,
Mhm.
and that his dynasty went on until 1953, I believe, until the Colonel's Revolution under Abdul Nasser. I was reminded of this when I was in. This is completely going to destroy the rapid fire. I'm so sorry, but I have to get
You're
it out
good.
there. Um, I was in DC. I was in an Uber one day, and I think I was speaking to my parents on the phone, and the driver says, "Oh, where are you from? What language was that?" And I was like, "Albanian." And he goes, "Oh, an Albanian ruled my country for a long time." And I was like, "Oh, you're Egyptian, aren't you?" And he was like, "How did you know that?" I was like, "Well, I'm a history major." But the point being that at least amongst the older generations, are the ones who are familiar with the history, they
Yeah.
still know, and that's pretty cool. Having a much larger history than you're given in the official narrative sometimes, or than even your geographical or your numbers would have you believe. I've always found his history really interesting.
Very cool. Second question. What would you do for a job if money wasn't a concern?
You know, something, yet another cliche,
Mhm.
that not involves, but necessitates traveling all around the world.
Yeah.
I would say something that I'd be more interested in is sort of diplomacy, where you get to go everywhere. But I guess that's so stressful that in this hypothetical scenario, I would just be a journalist, maybe, but a journalist reporting on something really, I don't know, like food or art.
Okay.
But I have to go
Like a
everywhere.
vlogger type thing?
Sure, yeah,
That's cool. Okay. Summer or winter?
definitely summer.
Okay. Favorite place to travel to?
Sarah, Albania.
Okay. And then if you were a day in the week, what day would you be?
I always like Thursday, because Thursday
Thursday.
is filled with potential. The bulk of the week is done, and you're still filled with excitement about the weekend. Whereas on Sunday, for example, you're sort of still reeling from it. Oh man, the week starts again tomorrow, Thursday.
Um, all right. Well, that brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you, Enri, for being on the pod, and it's been so great talking to you. You had so much amazing facts, and just listening to you talk about history, inspires me to like go on and read about our history. It really does. So I love your passion for it, and I want to remind you all to follow, like, and subscribe. And thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you in the next episode. And I've also linked Enri's LinkedIn down below, as well as the YouTube for the 2024 National Ethics Bowl champion
Yeah,
competition, and then the Arbanon website as well. So
yeah.
everything's down below. Feel free to connect and reach out if you have any questions.
All right. Thank you so much, Joanna, for this podcast, for everything you do. This is a really incredible resource.
All right.
Thanks for everything. All
Bye.
right.